Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Mitchell, Chief Technology Officer, Inflow Communications. I'm going to be running this educational webinar today. So thanks for joining. Today we're going to be talking about disaster recovery in the cloud. So we're going to be talking about a couple different ways you can utilize the cloud for DR. And if you're looking to go into the cloud, we're going to be comparing a few different cloud solutions and their disaster recovery solutions. If you haven't hit our website recently to see some of the upcoming webinars, we have one on May 6th for MiCloud Connect. If you're not on if you're on 14.2 or a previous version of ShoreTel still, you can kind of attend the readiness to talk about the Connect platform and what the steps are to upgrade to that. We also have on May 30th, we have the impact of the understaffed contact center. So that's one of our contact center. Our director of contact center is going to be running that, talking about when your contact center is understaffed, what issues that causes and what metrics are affected by that from a customer standpoint. So we also have some June webinars coming up that are getting ready to be added to the website as well. So always stay tuned to the website for upcoming webinars that we'll be offering. All right, so I'll do a quick introduction on who is Inflow Communications, and then I'm going to jump right into the, using the cloud for your DR failover, and then some of the UCaaS DR scenarios with 3 different scenarios. Then I'll save a little bit of time for question and answer at the very end. So if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to post them in the questions. I'll try to answer them, as I go through the material. A lot of time I can fit those into my presentation just to answer them as part of the presentation. If not, I'll save some time at the end for question and answer for any questions that may come up at the end. All right, so who is Inflow Communications? We're a company who's sole focused on unified communications and contact center solutions. We don't try to do anything else besides those 2 things. We have a few partners we work with. We're a MiCloud ShoreTel Platinum partner. We're a RingCentral delivery partner and a Genesys PureCloud Gold partner. So those are kind of the platforms that we offer for our customers for on-premise and cloud-based solutions, all around that unified communications and contact center space. We have employees in 10 different states, all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. We support over 200,000 phones. We say endpoints, you could say phones. On that, with 800 customers, with locations nationwide and locations all over the world. With a lot of those customers have international locations as well. So we're maniacal about customer experience. So we post live web stats on our website about our response times, our customer satisfaction. We post comments from our customers on when they leave comments. We post some of those comments on our web page as well. So. Some of our customers, just a few of them, we span all different, types of businesses, from retail to, hotels to real estate to, food. So, all right, so we're going to jump right in. So first thing, most of our customers are still premise-based customers. So we talk a lot with those premise-based customers about how they can use the cloud for DR. If you're not ready to move to the cloud yet, this is a great opportunity to use the cloud for backup to your premise-based system. So that's what I'm going to kind of start off talking about today. So there's 3 things I'm going to talk about today when it comes to using the cloud for DR. The first scenario is inbound call failover. So, customer picks up the phone, they dial your 800 number from their cell phone. It hits your dial tone, and typically that would ring inbound to your ShoreTel, MiCloud system, and it'll ring out to a phone, and all is good. You take your customer calls. But what happens if your dial tone goes down, you lose power at the building or something like that, and your carrier can no longer deliver that call to your ShoreTel system, your ShoreTel MiCloud system? That's where the cloud can come in. You can have your carrier forward the calls over to a cloud-based solution. I put a few different solution options in here: RingCentral, MiCloud Cloud, Twilio, PureCloud. There's a variety of different systems that you can use to take those calls. The big thing we talk about with customers is when this occurs, the first thing to consider is the carrier has to initiate the call, failover for you. Is the ShoreTel system can handle your outbound calling, but we don't control the inbound calling. That's controlled by the carrier. We only receive what they send us. So if the carrier sees that it can't deliver calls anymore, they can simply say, oh, let me forward calls to these other phone numbers that were already pre-set up and as a designation for failover purposes. And then those inbound calls could be routing to a different cloud-based system. The next thing you need to think about is when you're forwarding to a cloud-based system is do users need to be logged into soft phones or something like that when a failover occurs? How are they going to receive those calls? There's kind of two options. Number 2 and 3 are the kind of the two things. Is are they going to be using soft phones or are they going to bring in cell phones? So that's when you're kind of designing this inbound call failover. You got to decide: are we going to have them log into a web page and take calls via a soft phone, or is that product going to ring out to their cell phones and they can answer calls on their cell phones? Those are kind of the things. Is the failover is great, but we got to think about how our end users, our employees, are going to be taking those calls once the failover does occur. The next thing is number 4 is, will the failover and failback happen automatically? That's something that we got to work out with the carrier to say, can you monitor this circuit, and when the circuit has an issue, can you automatically fail over to these phone numbers in the cloud? If not, you'll have to open a ticket anytime that happens and say, can you forward this number to this number, and kind of get and manually turn on on and off the forwarding with the provider. The good news is if you have SIP, most SIP providers can do automatic failover. So you wouldn't necessarily have to open a ticket every time that failover needs to occur, or when the system's back up and running, you wouldn't have to turn off the failover. So our preference, typically in most customer preference, is automatic failover because it makes it so much easier to deal with, and it's one less thing IT has to worry about. Oh, I got to open up a case for that or something. So automatic failover is typically recommended and preferred, but it's not required in that case. So if you still have typical, standard PRIs, you may have to manually open up, cases to get your forwarding turned on and off. The last thing to consider when you're talking about inbound call failover is the cost method. Some of the providers, like Twilio, is a usage only. So there's a minimal cost for, like, say, phone numbers. If you want to keep 5 phone numbers in there for that your calls are going to fail over to in a DR scenario, there's a small fee to have those phone numbers every month with Twilio. And then the only other real expense with Twilio is the usage. So when we route calls into it, then we have usage that we need to pay for. Most of the other providers, the RingCentrals, the MiCloud, the PureCloud, they all have a per seat fee. So if you wanted to say, oh, I need to have 10 users set up in this failover scenario, there's going to be a fee for those 10 users if you use them or not. So they're going to be a seat fee every month. So that's the other thing to think about is when you're thinking about using the cloud for DR, is figure out what makes the most sense for you from a cost perspective on that, and make your decision around that, because there is going to be some expense for having a DR inbound call solution. But just we can help you. Your account manager and Inflow, we're more than happy to help you, talk through what your needs are from an inbound call failover and help you pick the best solution for those needs. The other thing to consider is when we're picking a product is what are the other features we want to utilize. So are we also looking for outbound call failover? This is important to decide, okay, when we have a major outage or a major issue, inbound, our customers can call us. They can route to a soft phone, they can route to cell phones. We can still answer those calls. We can take messages, whatever we want to do there. But do we also need our employees the ability to call customers back, on that? Yes or so that this is kind of changes the setup. It changes which application we might consider if we need to also do outbound calling, calling to customers. The Twilio product is really good for inbound, but it's not quite as easy for outbound calling as like a RingCentral, or this is the MiCloud Connect client is for outbound calling. So those would be a little bit better solutions of the PureCloud for outbound calling purposes. When you need outbound calling, there's kind of a couple of options to think about is using a mobile app. You can see the RingCentral mobile, MiCloud has a mobile app, PureCloud has a mobile app as well. You can allow users to be able to place outbound calls from a mobile client, and be able to spoof the caller ID in some cases, and that's another, option that I don't want to I'll talk about in a minute, but it allows them to place calls utilizing Wi-Fi or cellular networks, so that's a nice, easy way. That's my preferred method when I'm talking with customers about outbound DR, in the cloud failover, is being able to just place calls from a mobile app makes it really quick and easy. You also have the desktop option too, is the desktop app with soft phone. All of, RingCentral, PureCloud, MiCloud, all of them offer a soft phone, desktop client, so they could all place calls as long as they still had like a laptop or something that had internet access. They could then, use it to receive inbound calls and place outbound calls. So you'd have a little bit more flexibility, with that app. Like I said, it's readily available with all of them. The one thing we sometimes do run into is the caller ID is, what's your caller ID requirements when people are placing outbound calls? Is, can they send a DID that's assigned to the cloud as their caller ID? The DID is not really going to mean anything to your business, but every user typically in the cloud gets assigned a DID. So, are you okay just sending that, that DID outbound to customers? If they call back into it, it just rings back into the cloud, into the cloud PBX. Other customers say, no, anytime we place an outbound call, we have to call it as our 800 number or, our main phone number and stuff. So there is different requirements. If you have certain caller ID requirements for outbound caller ID, that'll help decide what system to use for DR, failover in the cloud if you need outbound calling capabilities. So just a couple things to think about there if you want, but outbound, inbound I would say is the number one use for DR Cloud, and then outbound, I would say, is second or third on the list of capabilities. More customers are concerned about receiving the customers' calls than necessarily, having to be able to call customers back immediately. So one other popular thing we're seeing use in the cloud is a DR auto attendant. So your phone system goes down, your dial tone goes down or something, you're not able to receive inbound calls. Carrier forwards the calls to a provider, and we can play an auto attendant to the incoming call comes in. They can say, thank you for calling Inflow Communications. For sales, press 1. For tech support, press 2. For accounting, press 3. If you need other assistance, press 4. We can do a nice little auto attendant. We could put submenus in there. And then when they select a different particular option, we could route that call to a cell phone number. We can route that call to voicemail. We can then email that voicemail out or do a phone call to users letting them know there's a voicemail that needs to be checked. You have some different options once we hit an auto attendant menu, in the system. Some customers just like to play an auto attendant menu and just take messages on all of them. But it still gives them the professional greeting of of your company and stuff, but doesn't necessarily let them know that we're having a major problem. We just take voicemails, that can be retrieved, by the staff. So things to think about, like similar to the inbound call, is the automatic and manual failover is because this is an inbound call. The carrier still has to to do the failover for us. Option 2 to think about is who's going to take the calls as we hit the sales department, tech support department. Typically, we need to route these calls to phone numbers, or if we're using a cloud system, somebody has to be able to log in and to a soft phone and take those calls. So we still need to have a plan of what users are going to take these calls, and are we going to route them to a soft phone, or we route them to a cell phone, or to a mobile app, something like that. We got to take that into account, so we design the solution appropriately. If we take voicemails, where are the voicemails going to go? Are we somebody calling in to listen to those? Do we need to send them out via email? That varies based on which solution you would choose, based on what what you want to do with voicemail. Some of the solutions work really well for voicemail, and some of them not so much if we're just using it for auto attendant purposes. If you're looking at an auto attendant solution, in most cases, most customers want to look at a usage-based solution. That way, they're not paying, a flat, fees every month for, or a ton of fees for having users set up in the system they're not going to use on a regular basis. If you had to say use PureCloud and they have a 10-agent minimum, that would cost you $1,500 a month just sitting there waiting in case we needed this. plus usage on top of that. That may not be the most cost-effective way to do a DR auto attendant for customers. So typically we recommend a usage-based solution that has a smaller guaranteed payment on it, and then you have some usage when you need it. So that's typically when we're looking at auto attendant, we'll use something like a Twilio solution, or we can use a MiCloud Connect or a RingCentral if we want to allow users to log into a soft phone or mobile app to take the calls when they receive them. We could do something like that as well. But I would say auto attendant is probably the second most common use in the cloud, besides behind incoming calling on that side of things. And it just gives you a little bit of functionality, but not necessarily a full PBX in the cloud capabilities. But you can still maintain the same greetings and stuff like that to your customers that they're used to hearing on your regular PBX, but kind of with limited functionality on that. Way better than customers hearing a busy tone or number cannot be completed as dialed or something like that message. So those are kind of the three things I want to talk about today when it comes to using the cloud for DR to your on-prem system. I'm going to kind of pivot now to talking about if you already have a UCaaS solution, or if you're looking to go to a cloud-based phone system. What are some of the redundancies you should be looking at in your cloud providers? And I'm going to talk about three providers today. I'm going to talk about the MiCloud Connect. I'm going to talk about RingCentral. And I'm going to talk about PureCloud. The three products that we resell and we use internally. So those three I'll talk about. But it really applies to any of the cloud solutions you're looking at. If you're looking at anything beyond those three, the same strategies and everything apply when you're kind of looking at what are your redundancy options when it comes to protecting yourself for failover scenarios. So anytime we're looking at utilizing a cloud solution, there's some important things we want to consider. Is obviously all of our calls are going to the cloud. So regardless of how many redundancies these cloud carriers put into their system, if your internet can't get a call to connect to the cloud, it doesn't matter the redundancies that they have built in. So you want to make sure and take into account that your internet connection at your sites is the first line of defense. Is if you have a single internet connection that all your calls have to go out of and that has a problem, great. It doesn't matter if the carrier, if Mitel has 18 levels of redundancy. If you can't get a call on your internet connection, their redundancies don't matter. So you definitely want to take into, first thing is do whatever you can to build your internet, more reliable. I did a webinar a few weeks ago on this, on ways that you can kind of make, your connections to the cloud more reliable, either with a direct connection, an SD-WAN, with multiple internet connections on it, different things like that. So multiple internet connections on your router for failover purposes. It comes down to, but yeah, the first thing you want to take care of is make sure you have the internet at your offices taken care of, so that you have the most redundant options available to you, or what fits into your budget on that, so that you can make sure you can get your calls to and from from their data centers. All of the carriers that you're going to look at, regardless, I haven't found a cloud carrier now who doesn't have redundant dial tone. So I didn't put redundant dial tone on here because all of them that I was that I've looked at all already had redundant dial tone set up in all their data centers. So I kind of left that piece out and really focus on three options that do vary between different providers significantly. So don't worry about dial tone. That's going to be taken care of automatically. Take care of your internet, and then then start looking at the redundant options of each of the different providers. So the three things I'm going to be talking about today is redundant servers. So every provider is going to use a primary data center to host your phone system. What's the redundancies in that in that primary data center? First. Second, what's the redundant data centers look like? Do they have one redundant data center? Do they have multiple redundant data centers? Are they geographically diverse, in that case or not? So if it doesn't really help me to have a data center in Dallas and a backup data center in Fort Worth, if the area has a major issue, then I don't want both of my data centers to be affected because they're, within an hour of each other or something like that. So that's what we'll talk about when we talk about redundant data centers. And then the third thing is, what's the failover time? If they have to fail over between, servers or between data centers or dial tone providers, what's the failover time look like? Is it, an hour? Is it 5 seconds? And they do vary. They could vary dramatically depending on what that solution's data center redundancy and data center plan looks like. So, all right, so I'm going to jump in. Those are going to be the three things I'm talking about with each of these providers. So I'm going to jump in. I think we're going to talk about Mitel first. Yep, so we're going to talk about the MiCloud Connect. So MiCloud Connect has had some recent changes. Up until a few months ago, they were using like Rackspace, data center and another data center provider before that, and they were having some, they were trying to get higher redundancy capabilities. So the Mitel CEO and one of the Google Cloud president was talking and said, hey, why don't you move your MiCloud Connect over to Google Cloud data centers, and and we'll work towards providing 100% uptime. Google Cloud isn't quite 100% uptime. I think last time I looked it up, it was 99.95 or 995. So, very, very good, but not quite 100 yet. And that's why they're continuing to expand on that. So when they're utilizing Google Cloud, their architecture changes a little bit on what they're doing. So Google doesn't use redundant data centers in the same redundant servers in the same data center. That's not how Google Cloud does their redundancies. On this map, you can see the different what they call regions that they have. They have servers in. So you can see Oregon. The Oregon region has 3. The LA region has 3 locations. Iowa has 4. Salt Lake is a planned location. So anytime they go into a newer area, they put 3 data centers, what they call a region. Doesn't mean like in Salt Lake City. That would be, they're not going to put them in Salt Lake City, but they're going to put 3 in the area. So they don't typically like to announce exactly where they put them, but it's an area. So it could be all the way down to St. George, 1 in Salt Lake City, 1 in Boise, or even 1 in Denver. It's really a region around Salt Lake City. Like the Oregon region could actually include all the way up to Seattle, in that region. The Los Angeles will typically include all of Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona in that region. So they put 3 data centers in each region automatically. So with their redundant data centers is all Google data centers write your server data to the primary plus the other to one server in each region. So if you're in the Oregon region, you're going to have a primary data center probably out in the out towards like the Dalles. So that's where Google's primary data center is in Oregon. But then your phone system is also going to be backed up to the 2 other data center locations. One is out. They have one down in Southern Oregon. They have one in Central Oregon, and they have one up in Washington somewhere. One of them's still in construction phases right now, so there'll be 4 in Oregon soon, in the Oregon region. But your data is automatically stored in each of those data centers in the region. So your phone system is going to be built in 3 or 4 different data centers for redundancy purposes. So this was a huge improvement from the previous MiCloud Connect data center, where they had a primary data center in Dallas and a backup in Chicago. So they only had 2 data centers available to them previously. Now they have a lot more capabilities that they can put into different regions based on where your company is based and everything, and have quicker failover. With the Google Cloud, the typical failover is 60 seconds. When they stop being able to deliver calls to your primary data center or your primary server, there's a 60-second timeout. When that 60 seconds hits, automatically all of the servers fail over to a secondary data center in that region. So when that occurs, they automatically reroute phone calls and web traffic, DNS traffic, for desktop client access. Everything fails over automatically to a secondary data center in that zone. So your failover time is going to be 60 seconds. So in that 60 second, when it's failing over, any call that does come in will not be connected. There will be a time where there won't be able there won't be a system to redirect calls to, or sometimes they'll fail over the calls to the new server, but your users haven't been connected to the new server yet. So that's what they try to say. Give them 60 seconds for that to occur. Usually that's really good. I always say if you can have a sub 1 minute failover, you're in really good shape when you're looking at cloud DR purposes. So great. I think it's a great solution. We've already deployed some of our newer MiCloud Connect customers onto the Google Cloud infrastructure. That started in the last 30 days moving, so all new customers are going on Google Cloud. If you're an existing MiCloud Connect customer, they'll be a timeline for migrating them over to the new Google Cloud infrastructure on that side of things. But great improvement. With the Google Cloud is one of the most reliable public cloud solutions you can utilize. So I think it was a huge upgrade for Mitel to migrate to the Google Cloud, and they're only just going to gain more ability as Google expands their regions to more data centers. It's going to give more redundancy for the customers that are on that solution, with the goal of 100% uptime. Is the goal in the future, but they're not too far away from that already. So, yeah. Great option there if you're looking at MiCloud Connect. The other nice thing about that is it's very similar to your ShoreTel version you're running now. So there's not a ton of changes that your users have to get used to. Some of the phones are still compatible. If you have the newer 400 series phones, they are compatible on the cloud product. So you wouldn't necessarily have to replace all of your phones if you're looking to go to a cloud option and with some additional redundancies. So. All right, I didn't see any other questions on that one, so let's jump over to RingCentral. So if you're looking at RingCentral, I would say from one thing that makes RingCentral unique over, the MiCloud Connect or the PureCloud is their collaboration suite. They partner with Zoom for video, so that all of all the user licenses come with a Zoom video license, so they can do video conferencing and audio conferencing. And Zoom's probably the number one video meeting company out there right now. So RingCentral's kind of got a good market right now for customers that are looking for a phone system and a good video a meeting solution. They're kind of leading that piece right now. When it comes to data center piece with RingCentral, they're a little bit different than the other two products here we're going to be talking about, because they run their own proprietary data center setup. So they have two primary data centers. They have a primary data center in Virginia and a primary data center in the Bay Area in California. And based on where your company is based, your system is going to be built out of one of those two data centers. If you're an East Coast company or closer to the East Coast, you'll be there. If you're a West Coast company or close to the West Coast, that'll be your primary data center. And they own all of the equipment in the racks. They use tier 1 data centers, so it's not a data center that RingCentral owns outright. They buy space in some of the biggest data centers that are available to them. So each phone system is assigned a primary server in your data center and a secondary server in your data center. So your phone system is on two different servers in your primary data center, and it's automatically syncing between them. So they can fail over if one server in that data center has a problem, they can fail over automatically to the secondary data center or secondary server in that same data center on that side of things. So instead of using kind of regions, they use multiple servers inside that same data center instead of using a region failover. If they have a major data center issue, or last year there was the hurricane that came through through the East Coast, and as a precaution, RingCentral decided, we're going to move all of our users who are in our Virginia data center, we're just going to move to our California data center automatically. And they actually moved all those users without even telling any of the customers that they did the move, and they didn't have a single support ticket opened when they moved users from Virginia to California, because it was all happened automatically. All the calls routed over, and everything changed over smoothly for them. So in the backup data center, so if you're in California, you have your primary server and your secondary server. In Virginia, you have a matching pair. So you have a a primary spare and a secondary spare in Virginia. So your phone system is actually stored on 4 different servers, but in 2 different data centers. So it's a little bit different than like the Google Cloud we talked about, where you're on 4 servers, but in 4 different locations, 3 or 4 different locations. Your phone system with RingCentral is on 4 servers, but in 2 locations only. So they picked East and West Coast to be so that the data centers aren't located close to each other, so they shouldn't be affected by the same type of natural disasters and stuff at the same time. The one thing that, because it's a RingCentral designed failover, is they have one of the fastest failovers occurring, and they say it's typically 30 seconds to 60 seconds for the failover to occur if they need to failover. And that's mainly because they've built the heartbeat system that they're doing between it, and they've built everything from the ground up when it comes to that. So so their failover is probably the fastest that I've seen, at least for the ones I was looking at on it. But they have the highest cost to maintain their data center infrastructure because they own everything. So they have to keep buying racks of gear, and routers and firewalls and all that kind of stuff. So they have the highest expense to maintain their data center infrastructure because they own everything, whereas as opposed to Mitel using Google Cloud, they're just leasing space on the Google infrastructure. And the more customers they get, the more space they lease, but they don't necessarily have to invest in in the racks of servers and stuff ahead of time before the customers need that much. So a little bit different setup for RingCentral. Very similar results so far. Their uptime is very similar to Google's. I think they said they're at 99.995. So very, very close to similar to what Google Cloud uptime is when it comes to that. So if you happen to be on the East Coast or the West Coast, you're going to get a data center that's fairly close to you. If you're somewhere in the middle, in the Midwest, your calls are going to have to go to one coast or the other. They don't have an option right now. I'm hoping they've been talking about looking at a 3rd data center somewhere in the Midwest or something, and either between Chicago, Dallas, Denver, somewhere in that range. Hopefully they will add a 3rd data center, and that'll kind of give them a little bit more options for customers out of Midwest where their calls don't necessarily have to go as far to the East Coast or West Coast. All right, so now let's talk about PureCloud by Genesys. So Genesys bought PureCloud, I don't know, a couple of years ago. PureCloud used to be owned by Interactive Intelligence. And PureCloud was one of the first phone systems built solely in the cloud. They were a premise-based phone company, and they decided to make a cloud-based solution. So they built, PureCloud solely in the cloud. And when they started building it, they built everything in Amazon AWS. And they knew that they didn't want to maintain servers and stuff that's similar to what RingCentral is doing. So they built their architecture solely in the cloud. So with AWS, it's very similar to Google Cloud. They have regions. So you can see in the US on the map, they have 7 different regions. Right now, the only thing I would say is that the 6 you see on the East Coast is the Virginia region for AWS, for Amazon. That's the only region right now that Genesys PureCloud is in. So all of their servers, in locations, is all hosted out of the Virginia data regions, and they have 6 different locations in that region, spanning, like I said, different states around Virginia. But all of their stuff is being hosted. They have a West Coast right now that they're spinning up, and they're hoping to be live here in the next couple months. So there will be an East Coast and a West Coast region for AWS with PureCloud soon. They didn't say which of the 3 West Coast regions they're picking. They just said there's a West Coast region that they're enabling. I'm hoping it's Oregon, because the Oregon region is the one that has 4 locations. 4 in that zone, that region has 4 zones. So we're hoping in their zones in Oregon are very identical to the Google data center zones. If you noticed, very similar between the 3 AWS. They have a Southern California, on Oregon, and I think it's either Nevada or Salt Lake City location for AWS. So Amazon and Google are using very similar locations for their data centers. So Amazon doesn't use redundant servers in the same data center. They use the same architecture that Google does, and they store servers in different data centers in each region. So in Virginia, your data is going to be stored in 6 different data centers spread out throughout that region. So you have 6 location redundancies instead of say two data centers with 2 servers each. So it's a little bit different, very similar to how Google does it. One thing Amazon does a little bit different than anybody else with the AWS is they do what they call microservices. So as more users are utilizing a particular service in AWS for the phone system, it will automatically spin up new servers when the servers hit say 80% capacity. Their system with microservices automatically spins up and shuts down servers based on usage. So if they don't need additional service at the time, it'll shut down servers that aren't needed. As people are utilizing the service more in the middle of the day, it'll spin up additional servers automatically so they don't have to worry about capacity planning and stuff like that. Google just automatically plans a set percentage of growth available on every single server. Amazon does a little bit different, where their microservices spin up and shut down by themselves to accommodate capacity and needs. So that's a little bit different from Amazon. With Amazon, their failover time though is a little bit higher. They average between 60 and 120 seconds, for their failover between zones inside of each region. So they have similar technology to Google and how they're doing it, but their failover times are a little bit higher than what Google's reporting when they fail over between data centers. The other advantage with Amazon is they have they're expanding their regions with more zones faster. If you notice on the Google one, they had 3s, and I think one of them had 4 in it, where you can already see the Oregon and the Virginia already have 4 and 6. So they tend to be expanding their regions a little bit more to have more zones in it. And that's mainly because some of the bigger popular services that are utilizing, Netflix is all hosted in AWS. On that so there's some really big services that are utilizing AWS. So they're kind of pushing the expansion of the AWS, which will benefit the Genesys PureCloud long term, because they could take advantage of the additional regions and zones that are being expanded for some of their really big customers out there as well. So if you're looking at the MiCloud Connect, the RingCentral, or the PureCloud, they all have similar failover capabilities. When it comes to that, failover times are anywhere from 30 seconds to 120 seconds. So these 3 providers, because these are all bigger cloud providers out there, some of the biggest ones, they have really good redundancies built into place. Some of the smaller cloud providers out there won't have the same capabilities because they don't have the funding behind them to take, to use an Amazon or a Google Cloud. They're going to have to use their own primary data centers, in those cases. So they may not be able to offer all the exact same failovers and redundancies that the bigger providers, these bigger UCaaS providers offer. So that's really what I wanted to, to just kind of talk to everybody about, is when you're looking at making a cloud-based solution or decision, making sure that you select a solution that gives you the best chance of DR. That's why most customers are moving to the cloud, is they want additional redundancies that they can't necessarily build or afford in their own system. So look into a cloud solution. So as you pair your own internet redundancies at your location with a provider's redundancies, you typically will see a significant improvement in your DR capabilities by utilizing the cloud instead of an on-prem solution. So we have a lot of customers that's the reason they're going that way, is they're looking to build in as many redundancies as possible into the cloud or into their infrastructure. So, all right. Well, I don't see any questions that didn't get answered as part of what I built into my webinar presentation. So if there is any questions, feel free to pop them into the questions panel so I can answer them. If you don't have questions, or you think of a question later on, you can always call us, send us an email. We'll grab a sales engineer, we'll grab an account manager, and talk through that design or what questions you have. We're more than happy to help you with utilizing the cloud for DR, or helping you, evaluate and migrate from a premise-based system to a cloud-based, system. We're here to kind of to help guide you in whatever is the best solution for your company's goals long terms. We have calls with customers all the time where they say, well, we're not quite ready, but we're trying to plan out the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months for our phone system goals and and needs. And we're more than happy to have that conversation and help you figure out what is the best scenario for your company long term, and help you plan that out and evaluate different solutions and stuff. So we're here to help as much as you'd like. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to answer those questions for you in the future. So thanks for joining today. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes back into your day, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar in the future.